Well, yes, it's switched on. Should be recording now. When did you first start getting involved with the STA, the schooners?
Michael Ford. I have been involved with the Sail Training Association since 1955. Perhaps it could be said that it was earlier than that.
Mm-hmm.
In relation to tall ships, not in relation to the Sail Training Association, because it wasn't formed then.
No.
But my sailing experiences go back to when I was 5 or 6, and when I was in Brixham, Dartmouth, and I don't think there is a rock that I don't know from the Isle of Wight to Land's End.
Mm-hmm.
My love of the sea is because we're Devonians.
Yep.
And all Devonians have a bit of sea in them. My family goes back in time and is traced back to about 1200 in Exeter. And about 1500, we owned Northcote House, which is on the River Exe.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ford then had a daughter called Catherine who married a Drake.
Mm.
Now the extraordinary thing is, although she's not in direct line, I married a Nelson.
Yes, I saw that.
So the two are quite extraordinary, have come together.
Yeah.
And out of interest, I have a book which I discovered, passed down. I only discovered it about a year ago. My father had got stored away, written by and signed by Francis Drake, which is lovely.
Yes.
So there must be some quite close connection. So perhaps you could say it's in the blood.
I think it is, a little bit.
A little bit. After I left my prep school, I suppose you can say, the holidays were the holidays at Harrow, and we did different things to what we did at school. So I went sailing.
Mm-hmm.
And I went sailing and racing in Torbay, and that is how I grew up. Torbay is a wonderful place for sailing, quite incredible, because the winds, you've got to really know, very similar to Weymouth, but when you get a lovely westerly, it's one of the loveliest places to sail in the world. We had a house down on the River Dart, and one of the people who my parents knew were the Goodson family. And the Goodson family lived at Waddington, up at Stoke Gabriel. Hugh used to come down in his smart boat and make everybody know that he was there. Dartmouth was a wonderful place for children, young people.
Mm-hmm.
It had interests of every kind, and not only did we sail, we water skied, and I won't go into that, but we even water skied by the light of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And in growing up there, and you weren't like it is today. You never had a life jacket. You lived as a tomboy on the sea, and Dartmouth taught you everything there was to know about sailing. The wind shifts in Dartmouth were unreal.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a Dart 1 design, it was the most difficult boat to sail, and Anne Hine Haycock, what she didn't teach everybody about the River Dart was nobody's business. Hugh Goodson was there, invited me onto his boat one day, and we were talking around 1956. And Hugh said, "You're going to London. I wonder if you perhaps could help me, because we'd just been talking about the tall ships race, which was coming up for the first time that year. And so I went to London and I formed a London committee. And this was the first time that the Sail Training Association had had any identification with London or anything like that. And we formed I suppose you can describe them as social committees. And then, of course, there was the racing committee, which also was formed. Some very good people were in those organizations. And we went on to see what we could organize. And one of the things that we did was we were approached by the Daily Express, and they said, "We want to give you an insight into."
There we go.
We want to give you an insight into what sail training means. And so the Express said, "We'll run a competition and pay a bursary." And in those days, Stockfield was the secretary down at Liss in Hampshire. And so we got in touch with him, and he said, "Yes, go ahead." And the Express came back and said, "How about an exhibition?" So I said yes, jokingly, outside the Royal Exchange in London. And they came back and said, "It's done, it's arranged." So we had the grandstand seat, where I don't think there's ever been an exhibition, and I don't think there's been one since, where we displayed every piece of the equipment that was being made for the first schooner that was then being made, which was the Winston Churchill. On the Thursday night before the exhibition opened, I was the victim of abuse from about 150 lorry drivers and car drivers because of the blockage of people delivering to the exhibition every piece of the Churchill's equipment, machinery, sails, masts, wire, everything to do with what was going into the ship. We had to work overnight to open the exhibition the following day, and I was very honored in that I received Lord Mountbatten at the exhibition. And there is the exhibition, and there is a picture of Lord Mountbatten. We had a committee of Aldrin Drummond, Michael Harrison, Campbell, one or two other people, and Gay Reddy and Asprey. And it was a tremendous success. We invited Sir Francis Chichester to come, and he'd just been round the world. We invited Woodrow Eyebrows Wyatt, the trade union man, and we invited the Lord Mayor of London, and his name was Sir James Miller.
Right.
Now, Sir James Miller was so taken with the exhibition that he came up to me and said, "Michael, my son has just been killed, and I have his dowry, which I would like to give to the Sail Training Association. He
Do you want a break?
do you want to stop?
No, if you'd like a break, the wife's just come in.
Go on then, yeah. Sir James Miller, having said that he wanted to give his dowry to the Sail Training Association, he said, but I want you to build another ship. And I want the name to be the Malcolm Miller, after my son. Well, this, of course, we agreed to do. So the administration shot straight through the roof, because not only were we building one ship, but we now had another ship on the block as the ongoing position. Wow.
It must have
What an experience to find that you had put up an exhibition for which you had raised nearly 50% of the money for the Winston Churchill.
And then someone comes along
And someone comes along and gives you another ship. Well, that was my beginning of my legacy to the Sail Training Association. And I was mighty proud of it.
I should think so.
We then went on, and the schooner started to get built. And we came up to the possible day of launching, and there was an invitation, obviously, for myself to go to Hull for the launching. The night before we were leaving, there was a big gale, and the schooner was named by the fishermen to be a lucky ship, because they'd greased the launching rails so well, and she was rocking in the wind, that she took off herself and obviously fell over, but everybody said that she was keen to get to sea. And there are pictures of that happening.
I see.
And at 4 a.m. in the morning, the press officer, the press rang up and said, do you realize that Churchill's fallen over? So we were devastated. However, we picked ourselves up and got her launched. And all the things that have been said about sail training started to come true. So we then had a job to do, which was to keep the money rolling in, and we did that in London by various operations, like we had dinners in London. One of the dinners was above that place in Piccadilly, I can't remember what it's called, the sports place in Piccadilly. But it was a lovely big room, and we had lots and lots of people, and I managed to arrange a ship-to-shore transmission, which was broadcast during the dinner. So we were right in touch with the Winston Churchill, which was fabulous. one of the great excitements was that we received a message that Lady Churchill, because Winston was dead then, would very much like to see we received a message that Lady Churchill would like to come to see the Winston Churchill schooner, which at that time, this is another time, was moored in the Pool of London. Mm-hmm. And so my wife got out the silver kettle and the teapot and everything else, and there was a wonderful man called Glyn Griffiths, who was the captain. And there is a picture of Lady Churchill coming on board. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I entertained her to tea. And that was, I think, one of the most marked moments of the schooner that could ever be. Where do we go after that? We were the tall ships race in Torbay, the first one. Through the post came an invitation. The Equerry waiting is desired by His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh to invite Mr. M.J.H. Ford to luncheon on board HM Yacht Britannia on Wednesday the 29th of July 1970 at 12:45 o'clock, following the start of the tall ships race from Plymouth. Wow. We went on to Britannia, and we saw the start of the tall ships race from Britannia, with Prince Philip pulling the gun. And my memory of that was that you saw this one boy at the helm of the Winston Churchill with a wind of about 4 to 6, going over the line, and I don't know where that boy is now, but he had a bursary and probably came from Dulwich or somewhere, we don't know where he came from. And you just think of what was going through that boy's mind. I mean, that was quite incredible. That there he was, going past Britannia, in charge of this lovely ship. And then we went on tall ships, races, gatherings. We went up with Maldwin Drummond to Gothenburg, and a very funny story happened up there because we had a fantastic time. They were very hospitable, and we had a gathering of speedboats to take us out to the lighthouse at the end of Gothenburg Harbour, which was quite a long way, and there were about 8 speedboats, and we came back and had a barbecue. And there was the procession of sail, I think the following day or maybe the day after. But we had been celebrating, being entertained to dinner or whatever it was, and Maldwin Drummond had his own boat there, called the Gang Warily. And Maldwin, I think all of us were, one might say, celebratory.
Yeah. And
Maldwin saw his bicycle leaning against a lamppost. And so the next thing we were aware was that he, on a dock, there is a large railway sleeper to stop you going in the water. Mm-hmm. Well, these were all joined together going past Gang Warily. And Maldwin said, I haven't had a bicycle ride like this for years. I must try it. And with that, we suddenly realized that he'd got his bicycle onto the sleepers and was pedaling like mad to see if he could contain the bicycle on the sleepers. Well, of course, he couldn't.
No. Big splash.
And he went into the dock, quite a long fall, and disappeared. And the only thing that was floating on the top was his little yachting hat. So when he didn't come up for 5 minutes, we got a bit worried, you see, and started stripping off.
Mm.
And we were all just about to dive in the water when he surfaced.
Mm.
And as a diver himself, he knew all about water. But eventually he gasped and said, "Hey, you guys, what are you doing looking at me like that? Come and grab the fucking bicycle." And he hadn't let go of the bicycle. So we all had to jump in and rescue the bicycle. And then we went home. That was one of the memories that I had of the tall ships. And then I think, yes, that's right, I came to Devon and because I left London. And I set up about 10 committees in Devon, in the West Country, for the purposes of working the Sail Training Association.
These committees worked very well and managed to get quite a few youngsters onto the ships, didn't they?
Very well indeed. And I don't know why they don't exist today.
We have discussed trying to start them up again, but it's a case of finding the right people, I think, or the right kind of people.
Well, no, it's a case of having the energy to do it, because quite frankly, I mean, in 1996, I formed the Conservative Rural Action Group, which was an ongoing from a farming group.
Yeah.
And I set up 30 committees in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of
going out,
having the energy to go out and do it.
Mm.
And it seems to me today that nobody has this energy. I think there's a lot to do with expense and things like that. It's probably a lot more today than it was, but that is not an acceptable excuse.
No.
I think there's an urgent need to change that situation now. But it could be representative of all the yachting association, or all the associations. But let's go on to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. We went to the annual general meeting one year, and I was on the council. I was on the council for 25 years. And under any other business, the chairman asked, did anybody have anything to say? The policeman stood up from Liverpool. And he said, gentlemen, he said, I want to, first of all, thank you for the fine work that the Sail Training Association does. And I want to tell you a story about a boy who lived in Liverpool, who it was decided should have a bursary to go on the sail training schooner, the Winston Churchill. He lived in Liverpool, and he was told that he was going to join the Winston Churchill in Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. He thought we meant that he was going to a pub called the Winston Churchill in Liverpool, and that was in Edinburgh Road in Liverpool. Mm-hmm. This boy, aged 17, had never seen the sea, and he lived in Liverpool. Mm-hmm. This boy had never been on a train. And so he was dispatched on a train to Edinburgh, where he joined the ship. He went to sailed to Copenhagen, and when he got to Copenhagen, he stayed 2 or 3 days with his mates who he'd made friends with on the ship, and then broke down in tears and went to the captain and said, Captain, I'm sorry, I cannot take any more of this. This experience is too great for me. Fly me home. The captain had the sense to fly him home. This is the policeman telling this story, not me.
Yeah.
The following year, the police approached him and said, "Would you like to go again?" He said, "Yes." Halfway through that cruise, he became a watch officer. And he went back, and as the policeman was standing up, and he said, and he's there now, up until today, which is 3 years after that experience. Now, if that doesn't describe what the Tall Ships is about, nothing does, in my view.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've commanded sail training ships and I've seen the effect it has on people coming on board. And I think it's a great shame we don't have these committees, because I've been on board ships where they haven't been able to get enough people to fill the berth to go and do a particular passage. But there are plenty of people out in the country who would benefit from it.
Well, even if they don't have to pay a penny.
Mm.
And I think that people who run committees treasure the berth reservations that they've got and work to ensure that those reservations get somebody on board.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that it's onerous to run a committee. I think today, and I'm talking about very recently, I'm talking about last Sunday with the marathon, the world is changing to a degree, and I think we as elderly or old people should recognize this, in that there may be more activity collectively. I don't say communistically, but it may be that it is happening a little bit more with people acting together in groups. And in those days, everybody was very much on their own, making their own way, and they needed encouragement of a certain type. Maybe it's better that it changes again. So really, looking back over the years, I didn't have a lot to do, after I left the council, I didn't have a lot to do with the association. But I was racing at Cowes. We were 8th in the Olympic trials, in the trials before last, and I have done Fastnet races, Hook of Holland, San Sebastian, all those areas of racing, and maybe left the association to go its own way with Robin Knox Johnson in charge. And okay, I'd done my bit. Nowadays, it is slightly different in that I have kept in touch. And last year, I took my wife and my son, my second son, on to the Stavros Niarchos, and we went out for a day's sail. And I've been to annual general meetings and things like that. And I was minding my own business when, to my horror, I looked up to see my wife deciding to go up the rigging and arrived at the first port of call halfway up the rigging.
Nameless top, yeah.
Where she went up and came down the other side, which aged, I'm not going to tell you her age, I better not, but I've been married for 52 years, so you can work it out.
Well, I did do my research. I know when she was born. She beat me by a couple of years.
Oh, really? At any rate, how fabulous to get involved again. And I've got enough work to do without that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel that we must rejuvenate the STA. And I like to call it the STA. I don't like Tall Ships Adventures. I think the Sail Training Association is a darn sight better, because Tall Ships Adventures, okay, it is an adventure. Everything is an adventure. It depends on how you make it.
Yes.
But are you being trained? Are you getting knowledge? And if you are on a schooner,
Where Tall Ships Adventures tends to make me think of people like Classic Sailing, who run ships like Bessie Ellen and various other ships where paying guests come on board and they pull on the ropes for a week and then they go home. It isn't sail training in that sense, and that's what that implies to me: chartered sailing holidays rather than sail training.
yes, I agree with you. I mean, as I said, when I saw that young boy go over the line starting, and he was in charge of the whole ship, he had to know where the wind was coming from and what he was doing. And if they can't do it because they haven't got a boat at home, then wow, what a way to learn, you know. Fabulous way to learn. And I've been very proud of my second son, because he has been on the schooners and raced down to Spain and places like that. And I hope he'll take my place in due course in establishing and keeping going the Sail Training Association. He came with us on that trip, went up and out on the yardarm. This is last summer, and I hope we'll do the same this year. And that's about it. So I think, to sum up, which is really where I'm coming from, is that enough?
Yes, yes.
I'm really saying, look in every shop, look in every office, look in every organization and establishment, look in every police force, look in so many types and kinds of organizations that exist. There's somebody waiting there to go on the schooners. With the greatest respect to the other organizations, I think that the Sail Training Association still leads the way. It's got to be the mother of all the sailing associations. And I would welcome the fact that there was a big meeting in London to try and see if we couldn't gather them all under one hat. Whether that is sensible financially, I'm not sure. But it may be that we could pool our resources, and they might be used to have strength in negotiation. It might be that we can twist the government's arm a little more. Whereas if you are an individual association, you do not have that clout.
Tell me about it. I get extremely depressed sometimes trying to achieve anything on our own.
I believe that my future is to see if we can do something like that, because you've really got to get the nation to be brave again. I think that, dare I say it, quite a few of us are a lot of wimps. We're too mollycoddled. That's not going back on the old brigadier follow me syndrome.
No.
It's teaching people to have guts. It's teaching people that when it rains, you don't put up an umbrella necessarily.
That's me and my wife. She wants to put up the umbrella. I don't want it.
It's silly, but there's so much that one in this world that one can learn, and yet you find people who've never been out of their village, and this is a way in which they can go out of their village. like the boy that went to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And I hope that in the future there will be more tall ships. What a wonderful sight it is to see the tall ships going all together on a race. I do think one's got to be a little bit careful about over-egging the pudding with too many smaller ships. I am not happy about that. I congratulate the association for what they have done in having so many ships of a smaller nature, and obviously that is a good ocean way of going to the Caribbean and places like that. But at the same time, I think we're in a position of losing what we set out for. Plenty of people can go ocean racing. Plenty of people can have their own yacht. I've raced a yacht on the Fastnet race that was 107 tons in Class 1. We had an Arga Cooker on board. But we had 16 crew, but it wasn't a tall ship.
No.
And a tall ship is something that commands an enormous amount of respect and dignity. And it carries the name of our country. I think it would be important to be associated with the younger royals. I think that we need to try and get that going. So perhaps we should ask one or two of them to come aboard and even come on a race.
I would agree entirely with what you're saying. I took the brig Phoenix to Sail Den Helder 2013, which was the 500th anniversary of the Dutch Navy. And at the captain's dinner, everyone was all there, all in uniform. Every other table had its support from the local embassy, and we didn't. We were the only British ship there. The ships had come from Oman, Ecuador, Mexico, all over the world. And Britain, just across the North Sea, couldn't be bothered to send a diplomatic representation to it. And of course we were all given presentations by the Dutch, and most of the other people had presentations to give back to them. Except we just came up and took ours, and that was it. And I was so embarrassed, and I've been so upset by that. But that's one of the reasons I got involved with all that.
Alan, I think that perhaps you should be congratulated by trying to keep something alive, which an awful lot of people in this world say, well, that was in the old days. An awful lot of people look at youth and say, oh, they're a terrible lot. But when you get down to investigating and talking to one of these people, you find that they have something to give you, not the other way around.
I'm sure that when you were the same as me, when we were young, we were a terrible lot as well, as far as our parents were
We
concerned.
tore the place down.
That's right. Yeah.
But we were still prepared to learn. And I don't think the young today have the opportunity to learn as much as they did in the old days.
No.
Watching the marathon on Sunday and seeing one of those girls saying, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. Well, she was, 19, 20. What's she been doing all her life? Yeah. We've got to keep the youth of this country going. I think Prince Charles was very good at doing that. But we've moved on another generation, and we've got to realize that and really sort that out and offer to these people not a stuffy yacht club with a lecture night. We've got to offer them something better than that, because the stuffy yacht club with the lecture night is only memories for those who live in the area.
Yeah.
The youth are excluded from places like this,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore we've got to move into the area of finding, attaching them to getting a feeling that they own their own boat.
Yeah.
And they do. They own the new tall ships.
Yes.
And so a major effort should be made in trying to own those tall ships.
I agree entirely.
And I'm here and prepared to help.
Thank you.